All right. I am here with Nathan Barry, CEO of ConvertKit. Nathan, thanks for joining me on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, special podcast here. We don't really have a topic. We kind of just said, hey, let's record and see what happens. I personally want to know how you got to your first million, like your first 5 million, how you came up with your company name. But to start, do you want to maybe give an overview of like what ConvertKit is and where you are now?
Yeah, it sounds good. So ConvertKit is a creator marketing platform. Started in 2013 in the email space. So basically, I was annoyed with MailChimp and decided to build my own MailChimp. Where we're at now, let's see. So we've been at it for 8.5 years. We've got just about 29 million ARR. I'm like waiting for that to tip over in the next few days.
So you've never raised any outside capital?
Yep. No outside capital.
Not even $1?
Not even $1. I put in some of my own money. I used 50 grand of my own money from that I had from the ebook and course and audience building world.
But dude, that is fucking incredible, dude. You're the king. You got to be in the top 10 of bootstrap companies.
Potentially, there's probably a bunch writing under the.
Yeah.
But as far as
MailChimp.
Yeah, that's an interesting. We can get into that maybe later. That there was a whole interesting thing with them exiting this last week.
But how'd you get started? What was so you're at 20 million now, but there was a day where you're at 0, you had no customers. I'm guessing you had no idea how you were gonna pull this off, and now you're at 29 million. How'd you get to the first million? How'd that go?
Yeah, so my background's in UX design and interface iPhone apps and all that, and I was building an audience. I got to the first 800 subscribers, 1,000 subscribers for an audience around teaching people how to design iPhone applications, and that was the start of all of it for me. And in there, I started to get obsessed with the world of giving away a free PDF, content upgrades, or some of these things to grow an email list, and tagging your list, all those best practices. And when I kept trying to hack around MailChimp, then that was when I was okay, I'm going to create my own. And that was in January 2013. I have always been a work in public, blog publicly kind of person. And so I said, why don't
I have definitely noticed. Yeah, I enjoy it. All of it.
Yeah. So I said, why don't I build a whole company in public? And so what I did is I launched what I called the Web App Challenge. And I made up all the stuff on the spot, right? But and said, I'm going to build a web application to 5,000 a month in revenue in 6 months. And I'm going to customer fund it. So I'm going to do it with only $5,000 of my own money. And I'm going to blog the whole, you'll get weekly updates of how things are going. And I did that. It went moderately well. On one hand, it went really well. I ended the 6 months at 2,200 a month in revenue, which right about 2,000, which I was really happy with. I didn't hit my goal, but it was I basically learned that SaaS is really slow, and that the original goal.
How big was the team at that time when you first was it just you?
It was me and then 2 contractors.
Nice. So you're a solo founder too?
Yeah, I am.
Oh yeah, me too. I've never had co-founders.
I think there's times that co-founders would be awesome. And then I also think about the dilution of chopping your equity in half on day one, or the people who have 4 co-founders. I'm what are you doing? And then you're going to go right, it's just personal preference.
Me too. And you move faster as this is totally personal preference. Co-founders definitely, I think, are great, especially if you can get a yin and a yang, somebody who could sell, somebody who could build. But yeah, man, that's people I hear often say you're gonna get diluted if you raise VC, and it's no, you're gonna get diluted if you have 3 co-founders. That's how you get into the single digit
right.
but no one talks about that.
Yeah, there's
But
this idea maybe that you're shortchanging other people. I don't know. Like I've had a lot of people tell me like you should have a co-founder. And I'm like, okay, but then the company has to be twice as successful for me to make the same amount of money, or the same I guess, yeah, company valuation outcome.
yeah, I've always enjoyed it because I'm like a ready aim fire entrepreneur. And so like at business apps, I didn't grow it to 29 like you. I grew it to 10 and then I sold it. But I hired on basically all my friends once we kind of found product market fit, gave them, generous stock options, all that stuff. But not like co-founder options.
Yeah.
Because you've de-risked the business. So they're taking on way less risk by joining. Um, so that's kind of always been and I did the same with Microquire as well. So I think we're on the same page there, man.
Yeah. I think that especially if you come in with a little bit of money, like I didn't have a lot, but like to fast forward the story a little bit, I really struggled to do it with only the $5,000 that I first put in. And the idea was to customer fund it so that I wouldn't like go off on this road where I went away and built for a year and then talked to customers and found out that I built the wrong thing. But I had a hard time getting that going. So I ended up putting in another $50,000 that I had from, books and courses and like the other things I was doing online. And that ended up being enough money to hire someone and who like was kind of like that late stage co-founder. His name was David, but I was able to pay him like a decent salary and equity. And so that like he was working towards 10% of the company at that point. He ended up leaving after a couple of years when we bought him back out and stuff like that. But even in that position where you like work on the company for a year or 2 years before you bring on other people, it puts it in from like a 50-50 equity position into a 90-10 or a 95-5 or something like that. If you're able to cover their salary, because most people aren't excited about joining a company where they're like, great, so I'll just make no money for a year or two and that's cool, right? Like everyone's like, hey, can you at least pay me
you got to pay
$7,000 a month, $10,000 a month?
You got to pay up with equity for that sort of
Yeah.
commitment. Like, hey, I mean, we could even talk about this further, but I have strong feelings against co-founders because number one, 60% of startups fail because of co-founder conflicts. That's a higher rate that you're more likely to get divorced than, you're more likely to have a divorce with your co-founder than your spouse. So I think a lot of founders kind of go into this like, yeah, everyone says like, if I want to raise money, I need to have like a co-founder, stuff like that. But the reality is, you're also not only diluting yourself, but you're bringing in a ton of risk into the business. And arguably from my view is you just kind of move slower. Like you're just kind of tinkering. And then you got someone like, you got to run everything past and get there. I've just heard some horror stories about co-founders like in brutal breakups and stuff like that. But some people might be listening and be like, co-founders all day. But I should preface that with I have a wife that's like basically my co-founder that like gives that sort of support and listens.
Well, so one, I like that we're diving into podcast topics that aren't just like puppies are good type topics where we like everyone automatically agrees like of course puppies are good, like in this case it's great that people can disagree with us on not a dislike of co-founders but just saying hey that's not necessary.
That's better wording. I think dislike is too strong of a word. But it just, I guess I'm more of like a lone wolf in the beginning and then I kind of figure it out and then I bring in people that I need.
Yeah. And you have to have a broad range of skills to do it. Like if you are coming into a startup and you're only the sales guy or you only have this one skill, then I think you're going to have more trouble without a co-founder. In my case, like I'm not great at any one thing, but I know how to write and sell and design and code and like a bunch of things. So that means that I can hire a developer and know, okay, this is pretty good work. It's a lot better than what I could do. And I can be like in the early days, I was the design counterpart to their development skills. Whereas if you know nothing and you're trying to get into it, you need a co-founder that.
I would totally agree with that. And I think that's kind of like the paradox of being a CEO is you're good at everything, but you're not great at anything. At least for me, I'm like, I could sell, I could market, I could manage product teams, but I'm not great at any of it.
Well, so we're talking dilution for a second. One thing, like you've been talking about bootstrapping a lot more. You launched Bootstrappers as a publication, and you talk a lot on Twitter right now about like, owning. I can't remember the tweet today, but 7% of a $1 billion company versus 70 of 100 million, or maybe you had those in an order of magnitude lower. How are you advising people right now on like the raising funding compared to how big of a exit you're trying for, or any of that? And then how does a co-founder fit
don't raise capital. Just don't. Like, I think, I mean, for me, I raised capital for MicroAcquire because, I had a pretty substantial, I didn't build like the biggest company, but like I'm set. I'm comfortable saying that. And I felt the market opportunity supported it, and I wanted to work with all my friends again. So it allowed me to quickly hire back my old VP of engineering, my VP of product. So we kind of got like the band back together.
Yeah.
Now we're just having a blast. But I truly believe venture capital makes sense for like 1% of entrepreneurs, and it's all you read about in the media, and it's celebrated. And then I talk to so many founders that they end up in these jobs that they created for themselves that they don't want. Like they'd be perfectly fine with like a $10 million exit, but you just signed up for like basically, you had a few VCs tell you like, hey, we'll put your money into this. Now you got to go climb the biggest mountain with flawless execution on the first try. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think you should just like, I've had a couple of tweets where it's like, hey, just start small, like, service-based industry, bootstrap, an asset that you can sell, SaaS company, e-commerce, whatever, sell that, and then swing for the fences. So I'm kind of on that third step. That's kind of like, I have it written down on my whiteboard as like kind of my goals. You're already like building a monstrous business. Like you kind of like skipped step 1 and went straight to step 3 mixed with step 2. So kudos for you on that. But yeah, I just think, I think, raising venture capital has its place. But I just think for the majority of entrepreneurs, I guess to put another way, I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand how to optimize for the outcome that they want. And they get stuck in these situations where if you raise $10 million, you got to sell that company for definitely more than 10 million, if you understand liquidation preferences. Right. If you sell a company for 10 million and you've raised 10 million, that money's going straight to invest. You're walking away with a job.
Yeah. Many times if you raise, or if you sell it for 20 million, you're still not walking away with anything.
Yeah. And so, and then you got to get approvals and stuff like that. I just think there's, a good narrative around, building businesses around what you want your outcome to be. And that's all I'm trying to do is just, bring light to like, hey, there's people doing it. You can do it too. Not all startup. Like not every founder, you don't have to build $1 billion company to be successful as a founder. You can do this too. Here's some stories of like other people really doing it. And like with business apps, like, oh my God, man, we had like offers to raise money. Like we did the full Sandhill Row, like pitch. And I was like young and I kind of had like a bird in the hand. I was like, and every discussion was like, well, if you took this to enterprise, like it'd be huge. And I'm like, well, I kind of like, the SMB segment, it's working really well. We're profitable. Like, I don't know what I'd spend the money. I'm like, I'm young. And it worked out really well. And I think that's just to put it more plainly, I just think it's a much more realistic path for entrepreneurs.
One thing that I think about in that world a lot is like there's that line between like venture funded and bootstrapped. It's really easy to cross the line from the bootstrap side to the venture funded side, and it's very, very difficult to go back. Like there's only a handful of companies that have probably ever done it. Like Wistia did it recently being 3 years ago, where they borrowed a bunch of money and bought out all their investors and said like, hey, we're going back to an old school way to do it. Didn't like, I think Michael Dell bought out, or maybe took Dell private again, or like there's like a handful of stories over the years.
Yeah.
But if you keep waiting to raise funding, like let's say you're not like, I think a lot of people think I'm like a dogmatic, you must bootstrap kind of person. And I'm like more in the middle of depends on the team, the business, everything else. But the longer you wait to raise capital, like the better your dilution gets, the more opportunities you have. Like we're not going to raise capital for ConvertKit, but if we wanted to now, like you can give up 10% of the company for 20, 30, $40 million worth of VC funding. Whereas, if we'd done a seed, Series A, Series B, Series C to get to this point, then I would have given up 40% of the business already.
Yeah, no, I think, the way I view venture capital is it's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that decision should be driven by your personal ambition and then your market opportunity. If you're in like $1 billion market and you can afford to kind of swing, like that's what you want to do. Right. I think it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, the longer you are able to bootstrap, you typically will have less pressure. You'll learn a ton. And when you finally, like the worst time to raise money is you want to raise money when you built a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And you just need gasoline to put it in. And I think a lot of founders, with how easy it is to raise money, they put so much, and then it's what's celebrated. It's kind of like what everyone's doing right now. So you're raising money when you haven't built the rocket. And that's a scary time because like you're going to use that money and it might not work out. And then it's just not going to be a fun but if you waited like 2 years, like you're saying, and you really moved a little bit slower, you built that rocket, like you got a rocket now, so you could accelerate your growth a ton if you raise money. I with you, I'm not anti VC in any way. I'm more just trying to educate people on alternative paths. Here's what I did, worked out really well.
Right.
Maybe it'll work out for you. But I got tons of friends that run, like my friend, I'm an advisor for a company called Sendoso. They just raised 100 million from SoftBank. I've known the kid from college.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not like, bro, like how could you do that? I'm like, congrats. Like, that's your thing, man. Go big. I'm like, I root for all entrepreneurs to succeed, but I noticed just in the media, it was just like glamorized. And I just thought, this isn't realistic for 99% of entrepreneurs. So, let's call TechCrunch out for a minute. And then, let's start sharing stories about like, people doing cool stuff, taking a different path.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate it because I think the same thing, that sharing my own story and all of that so that people can take what they want from it makes a big difference.
Well, what advice would you give to like people? What are I have one piece of advice that really helped me when I was bootstrapping business apps. It was a metric that we tracked religiously. Do you have any sort of like advice you give to founders look at their company, like the key to make it successful or make it easier, anything like that? That's a super. But what's the secret, Nathan?
Well, as I think on that, what was the metric that you tracked?
Customer payback period.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is
more in a business.
So we built a model where our customer payback period was less than a month. so we could immediately reinvest that back into the business.
Okay, I have to ask more. Was that so? Was like paid acquisition pretty key to that model, or what was driving a lot of the growth?
Initially inbound, and then once, so business apps was a right place, right time business, blue ocean market. The iPhone just came out. We literally almost developed a BlackBerry app. We were like that early. And so the model was we worked with web design agencies where they'd white label our product. This is in like 2011. And so we wouldn't even pick up the phone unless like you were willing to sign up. It was bonkers. So like at one point we were running at like a 93% profitability margin, like something outrageously high. Like we just hit like right time. Everyone wanted to figure out how to get, their clients on the app store. And so yeah, there eventually we did expand to like, I remember we had literally had 100,000 pay-per-click campaign going for about a year, because we were in this place of like, we didn't know what worked or what didn't work. Everything, when everything's just going right and you don't have anyone like in the business like telling you what's working and what's not.
Yep.
Because we were also young. And then we finally hired a VP of marketing to put some attribution in place. And he's like, hey, you know that your 100,000 Google Ads campaign, it's showing like a 10% return. And so we call that it's notorious as the era of where we blew up a Ferrari every single month.
Yeah. Oh man.
Which would have been cooler. Actually, I love Ferraris, so I would have cried. I would have cried either way.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That's a great metric. I think the thing that, and this is super corny in the startup space, but like a lot of my story is a lived out, do things that don't scale, from Paul Graham, the Collison brothers, all of that, of the time that like we did this initial push for ConvertKit, and in 6 months got to roughly 2,000 a month in revenue, and then kind of stayed there, because it turns out you need a product that's better, and it takes time to build a good product, especially if you're, people and capital constrained. And so we sat there at that like 2,000 a month mark, adding some customers, churning out some more customers, and bouncing around for quite a while, as I was trying to make like inbound marketing work. And I was really struggling with that on, content marketing and everything. And then when we took off was about 18 months, actually more than that, almost 2 years in, when I said like, okay, enough of that. I'm going to actually, one, focus on the product full time, because I was trying to do a bunch of things to, pay the bills and grow ConvertKit. Two, decided to put in money. So that's when I put in $50,000, basically our savings, and said, hey, we're going to go all in on this. Hired someone who I mentioned earlier, David, who ended up leading engineering for the next 2 years. And then the last thing was I started doing sales. Like before I was like sales, none of the scales, I need something that will take us to 100,000 a month or beyond. Like I can't get on a call to sell a $29 account or a $49 account. Like that doesn't make any sense. And once I got rid of that idea and realized that every account that I sold made the next one like just a tiny bit easier, that ended up getting us a lot of traction. And so we went from, well, I guess another component is when people wouldn't want to like do the sales thing, or we'd get through, a sales pitch and they'd be like, oh, I love this, but, I'm not going to sign up like it. And they would have to give a reason. And I would say, or they would end up saying like, it's too much work to switch. And so one time, out of somewhat desperation, I was like, I'll do the switch for you for free. Like give me FTP access, give me WordPress, MailChimp access. Like
I love that. I love that.
Let me do it all for you for free. And they were like, okay. and it was for like a 3,000 subscriber account that was like $49 a month. And they had way too many automation emails set up. And I used to, with my 2 monitors, I used to turn on a TV show on Netflix. And then over on this other monitor, like just work through and, swap out their forms, in one case, I like upgraded someone's WordPress installation, was like doing a bunch of this random stuff. And it did not scale at all in the one sense. But then that was another customer. And then they would end up referring to someone else. And so it just went from there. And none of it was profitable. But that year we went from 2,000 a month to 100,000 a month at the end of the year. And it never would have happened without like the methodical direct sales and migrations.
Good for you, man. I'll tell you my inflection point, which is kind of similar. So our model was we would take, let's say ConvertKit, and we would white label it, and then we sell it into a web agency with a bunch of small business customers. And this is back when AWS was just in its infancy. And so I would go into the server and I'd duplicate like a folder manually. And then I'd change the colors for them, like change the logo for them. Like I'd have Photoshop opening up, and sometimes I'd have to do like 50 like in a day. Because I'd have one day like, all right, I'm going to my cave. And then I remember the day we automated that, I was like, oh my gosh. Like I posted on Facebook as if it was like the biggest deal ever. My friends were like, why are you so excited? And I was like, I just got out of jail. Like I don't have to do this anymore. I got
this section of my life back.
Yeah. I mean, but that I think I think you'd be surprised at how many startups like have those moments, where you're doing so much stuff manually. And then you eventually build, I assume you have automated processes around that now, blah, blah.
Yep. But one thing as we scaled, so we went from, 2,000 a month to 100,000 a month, with sales being a primary thing. And then like affiliates kicked in about halfway through that. And affiliates came from the same direct sales approach of like getting on calls with people saying, hey, like, why don't you write a blog post about ConvertKit? Why don't we do a webinar?
How much of your revenue comes from affiliates, if I can ask?
Now it's less. At one point it was like 35%, and now it's less than 20%. As
That's awesome.
Other channels. But
one mistake I think we made at Business Apps was, since we white labeled the software, the end customer is owned by the reseller. So an affiliate model probably would have been better. But the story behind that, some guy in Switzerland said, hey, can you white label this? And this was when we were at like 20,000 annual recurring revenue. I was like, yeah, if you give us 10K, we can do it. And he did it. And that kind of changed the trajectory of Business Apps.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've also, on our affiliate program, we did a 30% recurring commission for life, which was super high. But it was what Aweber was doing at the time, and they were the most popular player in like the blogger space. And so we basically just had to copy them, or that's how it felt. And now I think I would structure it differently. I think I would do a smaller thing, or do a payout for 2 years or something like that. Because when you start to look at the customer acquisition cost on the affiliate channel compared to others, it gets pretty expensive.
Nice. What are tell me about your culture at ConvertKit? I hear great things all the time.
Yeah,
like
everyone to say that. It's all.
No,
I'm just kidding.
hey, it works, man.
Yeah. So
like I want to hear like your favorite part about running the company right now. What you enjoy the most. Like I want to know about you, man. Like you're a fucking badass.
So I probably the team and the culture is the most fun thing. We've got a team, I think we're 68 people today. We've always been, a remote distributed team. A couple of things on culture. I think that culture comes down to relationships and trust. And everyone talks about like, oh, it has a great culture. And then they like follow it up by saying like, there's free lunch, and they list a bunch of things that are like random perks. They're not culture. And so,
oh man, we're on the same page, dude.
it's so telling when you're like, whatever you say after that. And I'm like, that's not it at all. So I think that if you are seen by your coworkers, seen in like a personal sense, not like, oh yeah, there he goes, but like, you're known and seen, your voice is heard, you can trust your coworkers to come to you directly when there's any kind of a problem. Like, they won't talk about you behind your back. They'll come and be like, hey man, when you said this in the meeting, like that, like they'll do that very directly. Yeah, I'm trying to think what other things. Well, let me just give you like 4 or 5 things that we do that I think help shape the culture, and that'll give you some insight into like the type of culture that it is. So the first thing that we do is we have a team stories podcast. So it's an internal podcast just for the team. And basically what happens is everyone gets interviewed, like the story of their life, and then a bunch of random questions at the end.
That's so rad. I love that.
So the idea is that if we're getting on a get to know you call, like say you joined ConvertKit a few months ago and it's like, oh, let's catch up. I can go listen to your podcast episode. We can skip the first 30, 45 minutes of what that call would have been, of like, okay, so tell me, how did you first hear about ConvertKit? Where did you grow up? Any of those
Dude,
things?
I'm stealing that. Like that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with finding leverage in everything. And so I was like, okay, if you come to a company and have the same conversations 50 times, like, let's just record it once, let everyone listen to it on their runs, and then you dive in. So like I have someone, she's on she leads all our content marketing and editorial and all that. I worked with her for 5 years. And when we launched this podcast a year ago, she was one of the first episodes. And like, I learned so much stuff about her in that episode because she filled in all these gaps of things that I knew, and I never sat down and been like, hey, tell me your life story.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Highly recommended. The second thing is we do something called Unsolicited Feedback. And we normally do this in person at our team retreats, but we've skipped the last, we normally do team retreats twice a year, and we've done 8 of them over the years. And just with COVID, we've missed, we've gone virtual for a handful. But what we do is we sit down in a group in your team. So let's say there's 8 people on your engineering squad, or 5 people on your customer support management team or whatever, right? And we put one person in the hot seat, and we talk about that person as if they're not there. And so everything's third person. When Andrew does this, it's really frustrating. When Andrew does that, it's phenomenal. I wish he would do more of it. And so for 10 minutes, people are just talking about you, and you just sit there and take notes, and you're not allowed to say anything. And we give a couple of prompts. And they're things like, okay, what's something that Andrew does really well that you want him to know, like that you brag about him to other people? If you were working with him for the next 10 years, that you two are going to work together. What are things that are not annoying? They're not feedback that you'd give him because it's not worth it. But if you're going to work with him for 10 years, you should probably tell him this now, and he could actually fix it. Like, hey, when you show up to meetings unprepared, it has this impact. So you start to get more criticism. And then another prompt is, let me see if I can get it right. Let's say that this person, using Andrew, using you as an example, are up for a promotion in 6 months. They don't know it's coming. It's coming. What's the feedback that you could give them now that would give them the best possible chance of success of getting that promotion? So what happens with prompts like that is this person sits there and they get the best constructive feedback that they've probably ever gotten. And they get the best compliments, the things that people are saying, like what they're incredible about their job. And then after 10 minutes, they'll have taken their notes, and then they get 5 minutes to kind of respond to the group and address things of wow, I didn't know that. Thank you so much. Anyway, it just
I'm stealing that too, dude. Yeah, we did that once at Business Apps. It was similar, but it was only for the exec team. We went around like the table and we gave like really candid feedback about what you're really good at. And, if we had any critical feedback, and then it ended with, this was like 5 years ago. But it was just like such candid feedback from the team and just like appreciation, but also, you know, like what the person thought your strengths were. And then you could probably, you know, constructive feedback. And it felt like it brought the team together. It was like, wow, thanks for the honesty. So that's badass, dude.
Yeah, a bunch of those things like make a really big difference. And so just imagine the culture on a team. If you did that every 3 months, every 6 months, I guess we do it every 6 for years. And you really stress, okay, don't save feedback for this time. This is just a practice session. This is just so that we work the muscle. And really, like the key thing that we're practicing is when something comes up, you just go to someone directly and talk to them about it. And if you can build that culture, like it's amazing. 2 other quick things that we do that are Slack related and easier. We have a bot that posts every Monday morning and says, what'd you get into this weekend? Like share a photo. And everybody, like you see this feed of photos and you get little insights into people's lives. Oh, he loves hiking. She loves woodworking. I didn't realize that they have kids the same age that I do, those little things. And it sparks lots of great little conversations. And then the last one is we have a little bot called a sup bot. And it every week grabs 3 people at random and pairs them up and puts one of them in charge and says, you're going to have a 20 to 30 minute, like get to know you sup conversation. And you end up, in a company our size, it basically breaks silos where it's pulling people from engineering and marketing and product and
Dude, this is fire, man. You can write like a book on like remote team building.
Like a Twitter thread or something.
Yeah, because it's not easy when you're in an office. You get that small chat, just like, hey, we're in the coffee room. And then you also get that like energy of just like, I'm around you all the time. Like I trust you. Like the more social interact, this is just how like long friendships are made. It's just, if you think about your best friends, like you were just around them a bunch. Like all my friends from college and high school, the people I work with, we just spent a lot of time together. And over that time, you build, strong relationships just it just naturally happens. Sometimes it can go in the other way and you're like, I don't like this person at all. And like, you want to hear some things that I did at
I would love
Business
to
Up?
hear it.
So I was big on fun was our culture. Like that's kind of what we really emphasized on. So we did some like goofy stuff. We had these like awards called like the banana awards, where it was like this little like trophy plastic banana. And at the end of every quarter, the head of each department, from customer success to product engineering, sales, and then I would have like a CEO one. We'd award that person, tell them why in front of the whole company. And if you got one banana, I'd buy you lunch for a week. Like I'd go and I'd get it. And then if you got 2, you got $500. And then if you got 3, you could get a plane flight to anywhere in the world, which was kind of funny. The first person to get 3 booked like a first class flight to Japan. It was like $4,000. So we had to put some like guardrail, like, hey, like, no, you're flying economy. Like we're not funded here. Like, okay. We would do end of quarter, like, since we were in an office, it wasn't like an offsite, but we'd shut down the office. We'd say, no one's working today. We're going to go, like when we were in San Francisco, what were some things that we did? We went like bowling. We went like, we took like this like trolley bus all around the city. Like we try to do stuff like that, just to make it like really fun. We used to have this thing called the Wheel of Death, which was kind of funny. If you don't have this problem, but if you ever have an office that has trash cans inside and you have to take out the trash and there's like 50
Yep.
people in the office, someone's got to take out that trash every day. So at the end of every day, we'd have everyone's name on this big wheel. And then everyone would bet. So like you could say Andrew's going to get picked. And everyone's putting in $1. And if I got picked, you would win everyone's money. And then I would have to take out the trash. And I always got picked. So that
did they weight did the wheel spin in such a way that it ended on you more than was statistically likely?
I'm sure someone got in there and like it was like
I mean, that's what I would do if I worked there. Is I would try to rig it in some way.
Yeah. Those are the three that come to mind.
Yeah, those are good.
Oh, we used to do workshops. We had a lot of movement across departments. So if you wanted to learn about sales and you're in customer success, we'd have like our VP of sales be like, "This is how you sell." Same product engineering. We had people that started in customer success movement. We were big on promoting internally.
Yeah.
So figuring out, because we'd ask like, what do you want to get out of this? Like, you're starting here. So just a couple things coming to mind. But
what would you do on like the development side? Oh, like people development to enable that? Like, because a lot of companies have that as a value, and then they either don't put in the training or they're promoting people too quickly into roles that they're not equipped for and they end up failing out of in some way. Like, what were the things that you did that actually turned that from a stated value into something that was actually effective for the business?
Well, we would figure out what role they wanted to actually move into. Like a good example was so the VP product at Microacquire today started at business apps and customer success. He's one of my best friends. He was like in my wedding. And I, basically started slowly passing product things down to him. And then kind of told him my process, which wasn't good. And then he kind of just took off with it. That's probably not the best example of how we like helped. He was just a beast and he just was meant to be a extraordinary product leader. But we just had really good onboarding. So we invested a lot in onboarding, training, basically from start to finish. So we only, again, because we were bootstrapped, we couldn't hire experienced like salespeople, or everyone we hired was, you just got out of college. This is your first job in tech.
Yeah.
And so we had like really, really, really good training programs. So everyone that entered the business, regardless of the role that they took, we always made an emphasis to make them better on their way out. And I've been trying to look for people to hire in other roles that I previously have worked in. And now they're all in like I have 5 sales reps that are like VP of sales now.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, it's badass. I had to call a friend. He's like, remember when you were paying me like 50K OT? I'm making like 350 now. I'm like, do you want a job in Microacquire? I'll pay you 50K. I was doing a reference call for him, but it was nothing like too formal. It was more just like me understanding what they were looking for. And then we kind of, get together as, a team or an exec team and loop in the leader of the department, and then kind of train them as if they were starting from like day one. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. Some people moved back, all sorts of stuff. Some people had hybrid roles where they were in customer success, but they got to write like on our blog, or like they like to write. So I don't have any magic tricks there, but it was basically like, hey, like, yeah, you're interested in this. Let's see if we can make this work. So it's kind of like a case by case basis. I wish I had like a outline playbook like you did.
No, but I like the examples, and I just think that companies need to realize that it's something to take beyond just it's not good enough to just state it as an intention. You actually have to follow through, and it's not like some magic playbook. It's just probably like career development conversations with people, checking in, hey, how's that going? Teeing up opportunities, like when you know someone has that product mind, then like sending them a product related problem that matches their skill level.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Like one thing I'll add is when I hired, I always looked for I would always look for these three things in these order. Motivation, attitude, and skill set. I didn't care about skill set at all. I was like, I can train you on whatever you need to be trained on. There's obviously some roles where that doesn't apply. But if they were motivated, like and willing to learn and like willing to like really give a good shot at making this transition work, that was the key. Like, are you really motivated to move over into this new department and this new role? Because if the motivation's not there, you can have all the talent in the world, but if the motivation's not there, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So that's what and then I had some like trick questions to like figure out like how motivated they were.
Like, what's one of those?
My favorite one was, so usually when they wanted to transition over, like here's one for marketing. I would line up 10 parts of market. Let's call it like 7 parts of marketing, like paid marketing, content, SEO, brand, creative. And I'd be like, okay, here's a piece of paper. I want you to give $20 to spend. I want you to spend that across these 5 skill sets, and tell me what you're good at. And then they would kind of write down like, I think I'm good at SEO. I'm a good writer. And then I'd say, okay, we're going to do this again. $20, but tell me what you like to do. Like, don't tell me what you're good at. Like, what do you like to do? And then the numbers were always kind of flip-flopped. And then it's like, okay, this is where we're going to work on. And this is where I think you should. Do you see the difference? Like, it's not about what you're good at. Like, I'm a firm believer that if you love what you're doing, you're going to be great at it. Like, so I'd always look for things like that. Like, what do you love to do? And so my 3 interview questions, like I'd be the guy at the end of interviews, and I'd literally just try to answer like, do I think you'd enjoy working here? Would I enjoy working with you? And do I think you can get the job done? Like, it was very simple. But that I always thought that was a fun one, because then you could figure out like, okay, what do you like? Because you catch them off guard too. They were like, I just said I was good at all this stuff, but now it's like, you got to tell me what you like to do now. And that's what I would try to like, and that's also a way of how I direct people in terms of like, you just said like, you love this, you love writing. Like, why are we talking about this? Like, what's your thoughts on this? So that's one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. That's good. I'm going to try more things like that. I have some interviewing coming up, so I think I'm going to even use that with candidates in a few different ways.
My favorite question was always, what do you like to do for fun?
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing I would ask is, tell me about like your last job. And then I'd kind of mix it up. I'd say, tell me 2 things you liked and then 2 things you didn't like. Mm-hmm. And then I'd say, let's start with 2 things you didn't like, or 2 things you did like. I'll let you pick. And if they started with the stuff that they didn't like, that was usually a high indication of kind of glass, like, half empty in terms of attitude. I always look for people that wanted to talk positively first, instead of, because your mind like naturally goes negative. And that was a big signal to me of, it wasn't necessarily like they fell into the trap. But dude, so we're, I know we're getting to time here. So with that being said, like, where do you want to take ConvertKit, man? Like, you're killing it. It sounds like you got a great team. You got any secrets you can release? Like, anything coming out? Like,
I don't know if there's anything, major secrets that we can share or that kind of thing. As far as where I'm going with ConvertKit, this is going to sound really trite. I'm realizing as I say it, but I genuinely mean it.
Say it.
Yeah. Of like continuing to optimize for the journey rather than the destination. I think that a lot of people are like looking to an exit or some moment where it's like, okay, once I achieve this, then everything will be fine. So they're willing to put up with a whole bunch of crap to get to that point. And the way that I've treated ConvertKit all the way along is the journey is the only thing. And there's not a specific destination in mind other than continue to grow. Like I do have a goal of getting to 100 million ARR. And the reason I have that goal is to like push myself and to say, okay, what type of plan will be big enough to get there, and to not get complacent in, 10, 20, 30 million ARR. But yeah, it's to keep building the company and team in a way that I find it interesting, to keep sharing that blueprint on podcasts and stuff like this, of like, so people can say like, oh, I didn't know you could do it that way. I thought you had to follow this normal playbook. And they can like pluck little parts from our story and example, and then just keep going. So it's kind of, I'm in the weird, like, not never sell, but like at least another 10 years.
Right on, man. I mean, I've always loved just reading your story, and just like, that it inspires other people because it shows that it's possible, and it's a total different narrative than I think what kind of startup culture has been, glamorized as like raise money, like build this, multi-billion-dollar freak show, which we're on Zoom. Like I love so many venture-backed companies. So
especially when they subsidize stuff for the rest of us, like absolutely.
Yeah. So not anti-VC, but you're sharing this alternative path with so many entrepreneurs that's so much more realistic. Maybe getting to 30 million might be pretty hard. I didn't even get there. I don't think I could have. So you're obviously doing a lot of things right. But dude, thanks for just being, an inspiration to other entrepreneurs. Like even me, I look up to you, man. I love ConvertKit.
Yeah, well, thanks for chatting about all this, and I appreciate all things you're doing to one, make exit opportunities better for a whole range of people, and not making it be the swing for the fences requirement, and then just talking about bootstrapping and alternative sources. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, well, dude, I really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for making time, man.
Sweet, anytime.
All right, cheers, bud.